What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and welcome back to the Rumor Roundup, our weekly series where we cover all the news and rumors that you may have missed over the course of the week. And under normal circumstances, we cover video games, TV shows, all kinds of cool things. But if we're being honest with ourselves, this week, there's only one news story worth talking about, and it's that Scarlett Johansson has filed a lawsuit against Disney. Now, why did this happen? Well, according to the lawsuit as it was filed in Los Angeles, a good portion of Scarlett Johansson's salary was tied to the box office performance of the Black Widow film. It's estimated, and I'm not going to swear by this number, but it's estimated that Scarlett Johansson has lost $50 million as a result of the movie being released on streaming services and theaters at the same time. Now, we'll get into what Kevin Feige and all these guys have to say about this here in a second, but here's the reason why this is such a big deal. Before COVID-19, there was just kind of an alliance between Hollywood production studios and movie theaters, that Hollywood studios were making films. But of what use is a film if there's nobody there to see it? Enter movie theaters that provided a means by which these films could be seen that were being made by Hollywood studios. The kind of agreement that was essentially struck here over the years is that the ticket proceeds from these movie sales would go to the Hollywood film studios, and the theaters themselves would make money on concessions. Now, all this changed with COVID-19, although if we're being honest with ourselves, this all really started with Netflix. But all this changed with COVID-19 when we all experienced the COVID quarantine lockdown of 2020. We couldn't go anywhere, and you had all these Hollywood film studios that had spent hundreds of millions of dollars on these movies that were literally just sitting in a vault or on somebody's desk in an editing room table. And the reality is, while releasing it on a streaming service would not garner anywhere near as much money as that would make in a theatrical release, 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing, and we couldn't go to movie theaters anyway, so they started releasing them on streaming services. Now, at the time, nobody had any qualms about this. It just made good business sense. But once the quarantine lockdowns ended, the expectation is that we would go back to business as usual. We would have movies that were made by Hollywood studios that would be released in theaters. They would enjoy a theatrical run of usually between 4 to 6 months, depending on the film, and then would be released to some kind of a streaming service, whether it was owned by that Hollywood production studio or some other studio that it was licensed to. What Disney did here is, by releasing a movie on a streaming service and a theater at the same time, it basically blackballed movie theaters. And that's why you see the movie theater associations and all these major companies coming out and saying, no, this can't be allowed to happen, because it will quite literally kill the industry. Now, there's a lot of unanswered questions here, specifically when it comes to why people chose to watch Black Widow on a streaming service instead of in the theaters. Honestly, there's a lot of people who are traveling now. A lot of people are still afraid to go out due to the Delta variant that's basically going around right now, so we don't necessarily have a definitive answer as to why people enjoyed the streaming service version of Black Widow as opposed to the theatrical run. But what we do know is that when Black Widow first opened up in theaters, it had a huge weekend, and then it immediately dropped off. And as a lot of you guys know from your own casual reading, Black Widow had the single worst drop-off of any movie that's ever been released to theaters from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so this whole idea of Disney throwing Black Widow on a streaming service, from the movie theater's perspective, represents a clear and present danger to the survival of movie theaters themselves. Now, the other big thing about this is that this will determine how it is that we have actors, actresses, and even staff members in Hollywood going forward in terms of how they sign contracts with Hollywood production studios. In much the same way that in years past, a lot of people signed contracts with Hollywood film studios based on the net proceeds of the film, and then the books were cooked to make it look like the movie didn't actually make any money, so they were basically left hanging with a $0 paycheck. Robin Williams and Aladdin. The thing that a lot of people are doing now is they're coming forward and they're saying, no, like, I want to sign a contract based on the gross theatrical proceeds of the film, so that they're basically guaranteed to walk home with a paycheck. Scarlett Johansson did that, but the lawsuit seems to allege that the contract was signed between Scarlett Johansson and Marvel, but Disney is the parent company. More so than that, the lawsuit indicates that Disney actually forced Marvel to release the movie on Disney+. Now, the reason why this is such a big talking point is because a lot of actors, actresses, and even members of the Marvel Cinematic Universe are coming out and saying something, specifically Kevin Feige, who seems to basically side with Scarlett Johansson. Now, this bit of information comes from Hollywood Reporter editor Matthew Baloney, who basically covered the concerns of Kevin Feige in a newsletter that was previously written, and I quote here, Feige is not a company man and not prone to corporate showdowns or shouting matches, but I'm told he's angry and embarrassed. He lobbied Disney against the day and date plan for Black Widow, preferring the big screen exclusivity and not wanting to upset his talent. And then when the shit hit the fan, the movie started tanking and Johansson's team threatened litigation. He wanted Disney to make this right with her. Now, the indication here is that Kevin Feige, again, sides with Scarlett Johansson, that he seems to look out for his actresses and his actors and his staff. More so than that, Kevin Feige went on record and previously saying that having a movie from the Marvel Cinematic Universe released in theaters offers a kind of experience that you simply just can't get at home. And that's an accurate statement. How different would Infinity War and Avengers Endgame have been if you were sitting at home watching it on your TV versus sitting in the movie theater? And it's not just the sound system, it's not just the gigantic screen, it's the audience, it's the people who were there. You guys remember the reactions of everybody, and in fact, I still go back and watch them now. The scene where Captain America lifted Thor's hammer when T'Challa returned, these are all moments that you would not be able to experience in the same way had you not seen it in theaters. So there is a benefit to seeing not just MCU movies, but movies as a whole in theaters that you simply just can't experience by seeing it at home. Now, in response to this whole lawsuit, Disney did fire back, although the response has more or less been criticized by basically everybody. So the statement released by Disney in part reads like this: "There is no merit whatsoever to this filing. The lawsuit is especially sad and distressing in its callous disregard for the horrific and prolonged global effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Disney has fully complied with Ms. Johansson's contract, and furthermore, the release of Black Widow on Disney Plus with Premier Access has significantly enhanced her ability to earn additional compensation on top of the $20 million she's received to date." Now, we don't know exactly what this means. If there was some kind of a secondary contract that was signed between Scarlett Johansson and Disney so that she would receive a portion of the proceeds of Black Widow, regardless of what platform it was released on, whether it was in theaters or on Disney Plus. But if that's the case, why would she file a lawsuit in the first place? The important thing to take away from all this, though, is that this lawsuit, regardless of how it turns out, is going to have a massive impact on the film industry as a whole. There's no real going back from this, and it could potentially set a massive precedent that when a movie is released on a streaming service and it's released in theaters, that now actors and actresses have bargaining power. They have precedent here, that they can go forward and they can say, look, we get that streaming services are the future. We get that there's going to be a time whereby movies are released in theaters and in streaming services. If movie theaters can't find a way to cope with that, that's their problem. That's not the problem of the Hollywood film studios. And so if that's the case, they now have the ability to collectively bargain or to operate individually and to say, we want to make our money based on the gross proceeds of not just the theatrical run, but the streaming service as well. And so how this turns out is going to be anybody's guess. And I'm interested. I'm very, very, very curious here. But regardless, that's our episode for this week. Again, only one real topic worth talking about: Scarlett Johansson suing Disney. But thank you guys for watching. If there's any news we missed, make sure you guys let us know down in the comment section, and we will catch you all later. Peace.